Let's talk about it with Paige Winfield Cunningham, a health policy reporter for the Washington Post. Sarah Westwood is White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Thank you both for being here. Sarah, to you first. Mitch McConnell has put off the vote, says he wants to get a plan in place by tomorrow that will send members home over the 4th of July recess. Is that actually doable? Is he just buying time here?
Well, there are a lot of Republicans who are doubtful that leadership can submit a new bill to the CBO by tomorrow. There are just too many objections that need to be reconciled between the moderate Republicans who think the bill does too much to gut Obamacare regulations and the conservative Republicans who think the bill doesn't go far enough in dismantling the regulatory framework of Obamacare. There has to be some sort of middle path between those two kinds of objections on the Republican side to the Obamacare repeal plan. In the House, that sort of middle path was found eventually by House Speaker Paul Ryan and the White House. But remember that took more than a month. This is not the kind of timeline the Senate is looking at. And you could make the argument that the differences are even more stark in this case. So it's unlikely that we'll see something by tomorrow. But President Trump said they could have a great surprise. So there's just no telling.
Paige, we heard Chuck Schumer urging the president to bring Democrats on board. But right now, I mean, the way Obamacare is set up, it seems to be collapsing. They've got to do something, whether it's a Republican plan, a bipartisan plan, or what.
Well, you know, I think in McConnell's mind, he thinks there's still a way to kind of put all the frogs back in the wheelbarrow, and I think the next 24 hours are going to be really telling on that front. When I talk to lobbyists, I think there's a sense that McConnell delayed the vote this week because he still thinks he's going to get there. You know, he wants to get this off his plate and move on. If he thought it was going to fail, he probably would have just tried to hold the vote this week and then moved forward. He knows he ultimately has to hold a vote on this, though. The Republican base is going to be angered if the Senate of Congress doesn't at least try to pass a bill repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, and that could really show up and hurt them in the 2018 elections. So I think no matter what, we will see a vote next month, and I think the next 24 hours will be really telling as to whether they'll be able to find this path forward. Even as we speak, they're making some changes to the legislation. They've added in that opioid funding. They're talking pretty seriously about an amendment that Senator Cruz wants added to the bill that would give states more opt-out from the insurance regulations. And of course, undergirding all of this is the problems with the marketplaces and the news that many counties won't have any options next year.
As you're speaking, Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate, is also speaking. We're going to keep an ear on what he has to say, and if he makes news, we'll certainly bring that to our viewers. Related to this, a Wall Street Journal piece caught our attention, written by Daniel Henninger, a frequent guest on this program. It reads in part, quote, Mr. Trump has to be wondering whether he would be better off with his version of the Obama presidential model, governed by pen and phone executive order through the agencies he controls. That may require separating himself from a Republican Party disabled by a permanent blocking minority with no interest in governing. The title of that article, Should Trump Abandon the GOP? Sarah, the president does seem frustrated by the fact that the Republican Party controls both houses of Congress and the White House and doesn't seem to be able to get legislation passed.
Right. Obviously, he's taken to Twitter to express that frustration. He's gone after individual members. But one of the reasons why Obama's approach, his pen and phone approach to governing by executive order, was tenable was because Democrats were in the minority eventually in both houses of Congress. So he didn't have any realistic chances of passing substantive legislation. President Trump still has that chance. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, like Paige said, is still confident that at some point he'll be able to cobble together the 50 votes needed to pass some version of an Obamacare overhaul. President Trump still has a chance to get tax reform, maybe even an infrastructure package passed this year before we head into the midterms and legislating becomes so much more difficult because members are worried about their own reelection races. But it's not time yet for President Trump to turn to the pen and phone approach, as some of his supporters might say. He still has the opportunity to work with Republicans as long as they hold both houses.
It does seem like it's as polarized as it's ever been. Paige, would you agree?
Well, absolutely, and polarized between these moderates and conservatives. But as one Republican senator said, even porcupines make love, and so I think there may be some very narrow pathway through here. Still, remember, McConnell has about $200 billion of savings in this bill that he could use to roll back some of the Medicaid cuts or beef up the subsidies, perhaps bringing some of those moderates on board, and then may have some room to add in some of those more rolled back of the Affordable Care Act. We've got about 9 senators right now who are skeptical of the legislation, and those are the ones that McConnell and his staff are really having hearts with right now. One problem, though, possibly is they're going to go home for the 4th of July recess, and they're going to be hearing from constituents who don't like this bill. It's not popular legislation, and so that's another sort of thing working against McConnell. They're going to be trying to kind of rally people throughout the recess, and then when they return next month.
He is a master of the Senate rules and procedures, though, and most people are not counting out Mitch McConnell on this vote. Paige Winfield Cunningham from the Washington Post, Sarah Westwood from the Washington Examiner. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.